I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. Finally, I will be like the Most High. The arrogance of him, created by God, wants to take over from God, although he has been thrown out of heaven. Now, believe me, there is a satanic plan to take over this world, and I'm sorry to tell you tonight that you are living in one of the test case countries. They are practicing on Australia and New Zealand. And it may interest you to know tonight that New Zealand actually is a state of Australia on the Australian Constitution. Did you know that? Where are the New Zealanders tonight, please? 3 of us. God bless us all. Did you know that on the Australian Constitution from the year 1900, New Zealand is mentioned as a state of your country? It has never been revoked. It is still there. I received a letter from a lady in Auckland. She wrote to our government to find out whether I was telling the truth or not. And she sent me a copy of the government letter, and this is what it said. It said, it is true what Mr. Smith is saying. We are a state officially of Australia. At least the provision is there for us to become a state. And all it would take is ratification of that, and we could very quickly become a state of Australia. Did you know that New Zealand has no constitution? There is no document in New Zealand that could be called the Constitution. And so one of our former Prime Ministers, I won't say his name, in New Zealand was on a radio program. I think it was Radio Pacific in Auckland. And one night he was asked by somebody, is it true what Barry Smith is saying, that we are a state of Australia and that we're going to link up one day? This man said this. He said, Barry Smith is a doomsday man. And he said this also. He said, if New Zealand ever links with Australia, I will pour a can of petrol over myself and set fire to it. Now, I'm going to send him the matches because look here. Time magazine, here it says, and the date is the September the 14th, 1992. There is a kangaroo and a kiwi side by side, and the whole article inside says, let no man put asunder. Australia and New Zealand head down the aisle to union. So they want to link us up as quickly as possible, ready for the New World Order system. Under the New World Order, everybody will give up their rights. Everybody gives up their independence and they all become interdependent. And this is a Luciferian plan, as may be seen by the strange seal on the back of the American dollar. Quickly through it again. The eye in the triangle is not the eye of God, it is the eye of Lucifer. Seen on many different occasions in many different places, on churches, Masonic lodges and other places. The 13 blocks of stone there represent the 13 power groups who are involved in setting up the New World Order, which is simply code for one world government. Next, you have 2 Latin words at the top, annuichaptus, which means our efforts are crowned with success to bring about a novus ordo seclorum, a new world order of a secular, godless, heathenistic nature. Now, that's been on the American dollar bill since the year 1933, when America came off the gold standard, and it was put on there by a man called Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was a 33rd degree Freemason. That seal was handed to him in a velvet bag, and if you want to read about that, read the book Second Warning. You can read how the messenger brought this to him in a velvet bag. He had a hood over his head. The president didn't know who it was. He put that on the back of the American dollar bill, 1933, just as America was climbing out of the stock market crash of 1929. And there it is. It's been there ever since. Now, May and I were on the Mississippi River one day traveling with some friends. Some of them were Freemasons, and they said, we don't believe what you're saying. I said, you will when I'm finished with you. I have in my pocket here some American dollars. I'll get them out. Here they are. I carry them. I cover them in plastic to try and keep them looking nice. This note is an American $1 bill dated 1928. This one is an American dollar bill dated 1938. Now remember, when Roosevelt put that on the back of the dollar, it was 1933. I said, if you look at the one dated 1938, you will see the seal in the triangle, the eye in the triangle, the eye of Lucifer. If you look at the back of the one dated 1928, you will see no seal on that, because it was put on at a certain time in history. Now that is very difficult to get hold of a note like that. I happen to have one, but I can prove my point. At a certain time in history, that went on the dollar. Now, if you were in the meeting last night, you will learn that the Freemasons have a plan. And I'm talking of top Freemasons here. Manly Hall, a top Masonic writer, said this: when the United States of America was settled, it was settled for a peculiar and a particular purpose known only to the initiated few. And so we have the two. We have the Pilgrim Fathers in America who settled it for religious freedom, and they have on the notes, "In God we trust." And then alongside there you've got the occultists and the Freemasons who settled it for a peculiar and a particular purpose known only to the initiated few, and that is to set up the New World Order, or a Luciferian one world government, where everybody loses their independence and everybody becomes interdependent upon everybody else. Tonight we're going to read in the book of Genesis chapter 11. Would you turn with me, please? We are now reading Genesis 11. Someone says to me, "Why do you say it twice?" Answer, people don't hear me the first time. And they bump one another. I've been doing this for years, you know. You see people bumping everybody and they go like this. "What did he say? What did he say?" Or to save you saying that, I tell you twice. We're reading Genesis chapter 11. Read with me, please, verse 1. It's talking about the Tower of Babel. "The whole earth was of one language and of one speech. It came to pass that as they journeyed from the east, they found the plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, 'Go, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, 'Go to, let us build a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth.' Verse 5, "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded." I like that. Like the Lord coming down, don't you? He says to all the angels, "Excuse me, I'm going down." And he comes down to have a look. Let's see what God says. Verse 6, "And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they will begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." If you wonder tonight why we're from so many cultures and speeches, this is why. This is the scripture we're reading now. The heart of man was so arrogant, with Satan in him, he tried to take over from God. So God says, "I'll fix that. I'll simply change all the languages around." Let's read the next one. Verse 8, "So the Lord scattered them from abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore the name of it is called Babel, because the Lord there did confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth." Now some of you will know that on the 1st of January this year, 1993, the headquarters of the New World Order came into power. That is the common market in Europe. If you have a common market passport, you can travel freely now into any country of the market. When you travel, as we do, through Greece or England each year, you go through the Athens passport control. It says, "EC passport holders this way, rest this way." Go up to London, it says the same thing. "EC passport holders this way, rest this way." So the common market now has got free entry to anybody with a common market passport, and they are rapidly moving on to have another go at the Tower of Babel. You say literally? Yes, literally. I now read to you an article from the paper The Daily Telegraph, dated the 5th of March this year, 1993. They're now getting ready to build another Tower of Babel in the common market. Let me read it to you. "The proposed new headquarters building for the European community would be easily the tallest structure in the world. It's going to be 3,280 feet. 3,280 feet, twice as high as the 1,450-foot Sears building in Chicago. Critics of the plan for the kilometre-high skyscraper, it's a kilometre high, were topped by the communications mast, call it Project Babel, the most grandiose scheme ever to cross the desk of an EC official. What do they call it? Project Babel. It is man's second attempt to set up a Tower of Babel. And I'm saying tonight that the God who smashed the first one will smash the second one. Praise God for that. Because we Christians are on the winning side. If you think that you're in the minority, you might feel that tonight, but you wait till Jesus comes back. You wait till he's running things from Jerusalem. And you're a born-again Christian. You belong to him. You're part of his family. And that day you'll be proud you became a Christian. You'll walk down the street like this. I'm a friend of the king, you know. Now, I want to talk to you tonight about politics. We talked about the economic side. There's going to be a worldwide money crash soon. You're all aware of that. Everybody will receive a plastic card. Cash will be cancelled. Oh, here's the poster I didn't have last night. Here it is. Here's the empty wallet upside down laughing. Look. And it's saying these words from the Australian New Zealand Bank: welcome to the cashless society. Let's say that together. Welcome to the cashless society. Over here, welcome to the cashless society. Over here, welcome to the cashless society. And all of you who are dealing with cash are going to be very, very sad in a day to come. We went to a fish market today. We were down a certain place, and Andrew thought he'd go and buy some prawns or something. And he said to the guy behind the counter, "Do you take cards?" And I said, "You're wasting your time, son. There are certain shops that don't want cards and don't want checks. You know that. They're dealing on a purely cash basis." I mentioned this last night. Why? They have two sets of books, one for themselves and one for the tax department. Anybody here who is into that sort of a thing, your days are numbered. Sorry about that, friends. All the cash people here tonight, your days are numbered. Tell your friends, warn them. We're going to Fiji in a couple of months, I believe. We should be in Samoa next month, Fiji the one after. And when we spoke in Lautoka, Fiji last time, a lot of Indian people run the shops there. They speak the Gujarati language. And someone said, "You better come down to the meetings and listen to what this man is saying, because I hear what they do over there. They are writing up their textbooks in the Gujarati language. And when the tax man comes round, he can't understand what it's all about." Very clever move. Many people are doing this all around the world. And you'll find the newspaper says that the countries of Greece and Italy are the biggest tax dodgers in the world. It just says that on the newspaper, because up there they have a system where it is very easy to dodge tax. Do you realise that they would have caught you the other day here in this country with GST? I'm speaking to every Australian. The GST system is a spy system where everybody spies on everybody else. And so if I build a house, I've got to fill in my GST number for the builder, and then whoever comes to do the power, he fills in his GST number, and then the computer does a cross-check on what I say I paid him and what he says I paid him. And the same with the plumber and so on, and everybody's checking on everybody with a GST. You were very blessed to get away with that the other day. But I'll tell you what, they've got another plan up their sleeve for you. Some of you will know Paul Keating was going to bring in consumption tax a long time ago. And he said, "If I don't bring it in, I'll resign." He didn't bring it in, and he didn't resign, I noticed. I've got a little note here given to me. Although the GST in Australia was overturned, the writer of this note says, "I believe the Labor Party will be pressured by the IMF and G7 to introduce a GST." Your comments, please. I will now give my comments. Here I go. The whole monetary system of the world is governed by the monetary lending groups. I'll put their names on the board here. One of them is called the Bank for International Settlements. You can read all about this in my book, Final Notice, if you're interested in all the details of this. The names are in here. Final Notice. The Bank for International Settlements has a power group within it called the G7. Now, the G7 were in the newspaper today. I got myself an Australian paper, and I see them mentioned already. Then you have another group called the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Then you have another group called the World Bank, and so on. Now, if the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund wants to lend money to a country, they must go cap in hand to the G7 and get permission to lend money. Because these guys here control the money system of the world. They are very powerful indeed. They set the interest rates up and down and so on. Now, the clever plan was this years ago: to set up the world government, they lent every country in the world lots and lots of money. Let me ask you a question. Is your country in debt? Yes, it is. You're in debt to the International Monetary Fund, as New Zealand is, and the whole of Africa and most other countries also. Now, when the International Monetary Fund lends you money, they have things called strings attached. And I'll put this on to show you how it goes. This is it here, taken from a paper called the Sunday Tribune on July the 28th, 1991, probably South Africa, that's right. International Monetary Fund funding likely but with strings. Says here, International Monetary Fund assistance has meant subjecting their economies to a brutal form of shock therapy. A brutal form of shock therapy prescribed by the IMF as a condition for receiving financial assistance. I was talking to an African guy the other day. He came down to New Zealand. He said, Mr. Smith, I have seen your videos for years and you are spot on. That's what he said. He said, you come up to Africa, you'll find the International Monetary Fund has lent money to everybody, as they have lent money to all the countries of the world pretty well. Now, with the money, they have also conditions, and these conditions are called conditionalities policies. Conditionalities policies. And the conditionalities policies say this: you will agree with our plans to recover our money. You will set up a goods and services tax, or you will set up a consumption tax, or a VAT, whatever you want to call it. You will do this and you'll do that. And the people of Australia wonder why the politicians never seem to tell the truth. You say they promise us this, then they get a job and they don't seem to do it. Why don't they? Here's the reason: they can't. Already the policies have been signed and sealed years ago by previous governments, and the people who come to power these days are powerless to change anything. They can't do anything. Not only that, they've also signed years ago things called United Nations treaties, and as soon as the United Nations says jump, everybody in the world jumps and fills in these treaties and signs them and ratifies them. And I want to tell you tonight, there's a real wicked one coming out in New Zealand on the 1st of November this year. It makes it illegal for any person to speak publicly against anything else they find not very nice. I'm not allowed to speak publicly about anything that I find anti-God. As soon as I do, I can be fined from $7,000 to $50,000 and go to prison for 1 year, as from the 1st of November this year. That is a United Nations convention called Human Rights. And I've got it in my bag there, and that thing's coming over here as well. It's called harmonisation, so everybody will be in harmony and we'll all get along very nicely together. But I tell you what, it's evil, it's demonic, and we'll keep preaching anyway. You can always come and visit me. Send me food parcels. You say, all right, well, where are we up to at the moment? Well, we find out now that they want to bring in a different system altogether politically, which means everybody gives up their independence and become interdependent. Will you agree with me that the country of Australia is being ruined? It's not like it used to be. Anybody agree with that? Here's a poor farmer in today's paper. I read this here. It says in the Australian paper today, sheep farmers penned in by drought. I am speaking to you at Calvary Chapel, George's Hall, and the date is the 14th of April 1993. I am reading to you about the sheep farmers. Listen to this. The government's blunt warning to the farmers to quit the stricken wool industry or diversify has a hollow ring for trapped growers like these people here. 4 years ago, farmers were being encouraged to grow as much wool as they could. Today, the prices are 1/3 of those levels, and growers are being advised to leave the industry. The only options are to leave or seek full-time work while running the property on the weekends. And even in New Zealand, I get telephone calls from all around the world because people know this is my subject. A lady rang me the other day from Hobart. She said, or out of Hobart, she said, Mr. Smith, we are sheep farmers and our farming is going down the tubes. What do we do? And I did the best to advise her the best way I could. Do you realise the same is happening in New Zealand? We used to have 3.5 million people in our country with 73 million sheep. Now we've got 54 million sheep. What's happening? They're cutting back on the food supplies. This is part of the world government thing. In your country, what are they doing with the sheep? I saw it on television. They're digging big holes in the ground with bulldozers. They're putting the sheep in there and blowing them away by the millions. Not thousands, but millions. And what are they doing? Chopping down on the food supplies, and here are the rules of the New World Order. Write them down, please. Rules. By controlling energy, we can control nations, and by controlling food, we can control individuals. I'll say it once more. By controlling energy, we can control nations, and by controlling food, we can control individuals. Now, under the New World Order system, every country will become responsible for one product in particular. And I'll tell you what you are responsible for. Listen to it. Wheat. Your country is responsible for wheat. What's New Zealand famous for? We are famous for pine trees, logs. We used to be famous for dairy products, for sheep, meat and wool and all this stuff. They're ruining those guys, and they're ruining your sheep farmers here. Why? Because you're no longer responsible for meat and wool. You are responsible for wheat. South Africa is responsible for minerals. That is why you'll find in Australia at Wollongong and up at Newcastle, your steel mills are being gradually wound to a close. They're winding them right back because you are no longer famous for steel, you are famous for wheat. Then every country in the world will have to bargain with one another, and they will be responsible to give that product or sell that product to every other country in the world. The only other country in the world that grows pine trees like New Zealand is Chile, and we're about the same latitude there, you see. We grow them very, very quickly indeed. And so, if anybody wants pine logs, they'll go to Chile or New Zealand. If they want wheat, they'll come to Australia. If they want minerals, they go to South Africa, and so on. This is the plan for the global village or the new world order. There you have the eye of Lucifer, this time arrogantly put down on top of the triangle, which means the plan has already succeeded. They've linked the two together. And there's the global village there, all the people. And they're now talking about communications for the whole world. That's why under the new world order, every country in the world is selling out telecom. Do you have telecom in this country? Have they sold it? Not quite. They will. They'll sell it. Every telecom must be sold. All communications must be sold to overseas because they're setting up a global dossier. Next one, let's go back now and look at the recap on the eye and the triangle. Announcing the birth of the new world order without God, under the all-seeing eye of Satan, the Antichrist, 666. The plan is conducted by a group of people who follow the plans of Fabian socialism. If you've got a pen, write this down, please. It's very important that you understand this and tell your friends about it. Fabian socialism is in your country, alive and well. I remember Mr. Keating spoke to the Fabian socialists some time ago. He actually speaks to the group. It is a society working in this country. Others in important positions also belong to this group. Now here are the three main planks of Fabian socialism. Number one, the plank is called gradualism. Gradually you sneak up on the people, and when the time is right you hit hard. And then the third thing is you never deviate. It doesn't matter what they say to you. They say, we'll kick you out at the next election. It doesn't matter. You must never deviate from your plan. The next one. Next plank is called dispossession. Now, every book on world government I have read tells me this, that every world government group believes that ownership of land and real estate gives people a measure of security. So they want to take your land and house off you. How do they do it? This is how they do it. Two dear old words. Tax. You may have heard of tax. And the other word is rates. They keep putting the tax up and up and up. They bring in new taxes all the time, and you think they're finished with you. Don't you believe it? You can have a visit from a nice man from the government one day soon. He walks into your house and says, hello, do you own this house? You say, yes. Good, he says. We're putting a capital gains tax on all these houses. It's all paid for? Yes, good, he says. Do you own all the furniture and everything in this house? Yes, you say, it's all paid for. Good, he says, we would like a list of all that. This is called assets tax. We would like to know all about your knives and forks and spoons, your carpets and your curtains, and all the pictures on the wall and the vases and all your furniture will go on the assets list. Would you do that for us? Thank you very much. And then a bit later, and he comes back again, he says, do you own that boat outside? Yes, we go have lovely holidays on that up on the Gold Coast. Glad about that, he says. Do you own the caravan? Yes, we have great holidays on that too. I'm sure you do, he says. Put those down, would you? We're bringing out a luxury tax on those things. And then he says, have you received any money from your grandparents who have died? Yes, Granddad died the other day and left me 25,000. Good, he says. We'll call that inheritance tax, shall we? And it goes on and on and on and on and on, up and up and up. And then they put rates on your property so that you cannot pay the rates nor the tax. And then your friendly man from the government comes along and says this, don't worry, if you can't pay your tax and rates, simply sign your property over to us and we will let you live on the property as a tenant. And that is what they're doing in New Zealand now. In many cases, the people are being driven off their properties. They're allowed to come back not as owners but as tenants on their own properties. You will remember this in days ahead, you see. Now, in England years ago, they had a window tax. Did you know that? On houses facing the street with windows, they had a tax on the windows, so people would put boards over their windows. In Holland, I hear they had a tree tax, and the people were busy cutting down the trees so that they wouldn't have to pay the tax. Number 3, there is another plan of Fabian socialism. This is called pauperisation. Pauperisation. You should be writing that down. You say, what does that mean? It comes from the dear old English word pauper, which means to destroy every sector of society using the best method possible to destroy it. I am now going to call out the destroyed sectors in my country, and you can tell me whether they're being destroyed in this country or not. Once you see all this in order, you can say, I see how they're doing it. When you see it little by little, you don't understand, but when someone puts it all together, you can see it very clearly indeed. Here we go. First of all, to destroy all small business, write that down please. Destroy all small business, and then merge all big business. Merge, 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 until we get to about 6 companies that'll run the whole of Australia. About 6 companies will run the whole of America. About 6 companies will run the whole of New Zealand. 6 companies the whole of South Africa, and the world government people will control those 6 companies. Now, if you don't believe me, did you know that all the airlines are merging now? You'll find Air New Zealand and Qantas. Who else have they joined with? British Airways. And they're all linking together. You'll find Ansett and the other one, Australian Airlines, they're all linking up. What's happening? They say they're going to have a global airline. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's not a global airline. They said they are moving towards the global airline. The definite article is used there. They want to have one airline for the whole world. A global village, this is called. Have you noticed the way they're cutting down on the armies all across the world? They're getting rid of military bases everywhere, shutting them down. Why? They're going to have a one international army for the global village. George Bush's New World Order was called Global 2000 by Jimmy Carter, and it is called Novus Ordo Seclorum on the back of every American dollar bill. Don't say it's not happening. It's here now, and we need to get right with God. Everybody needs to get right with Jesus and get to know salvation through the precious blood of Christ. Now tonight I'm going through these words. You may have heard some of these words before. Who has ever heard of the word restructuring? Restructuring. Do you have that over here? Restructuring in simple English means to change everything, to destroy the original system. Have you noticed that the original Australia that you grew up in has been suddenly destroyed within a period of 10 years? It's called restructuring. They use another word. Using words like this is simply another way of saying things so people don't know what you mean. It's very similar to calling a coffin a casket. To the guy that's in it, it doesn't make much difference. Who has heard of the word redundant? Or do you use the word retrenched over here? Redundant. In South Africa I use the word retrenched, that's the word. Now what does redundant mean? It means getting the sack in 3 stages. Here are the 3 stages for getting the sack under redundancy. Number 1, you're working in the factory wearing your green smock. You're very happily engaged there. One morning you go to have your cup of coffee and someone comes in and says, have you heard the news? This is called stage 1, the leak. And so the leak goes out, we're all going to lose our jobs. Everybody weeps, nobody has a cup of coffee, they're all upset. They hang on to each other and they say, it can't be happening, I've been here for 30 years, says Mabel to Millie. A couple of days later, after all the crying is over, people have been all upset, in comes the management, and this is stage 2, it's called the denial. The manager comes in, he said, have you heard the news, you're going to be sacked? They say, yes, is it true? No, it's not true, he says. That is stage 2, the denial. Now by that time, psychologically, all the grief is gone, you see. The people are used to it by this point. They've done all their crying. So the manager denies it, everybody feels a lot better at that point. Stage 3, a couple of days later, in comes the manager again with a brown envelope and says, down the road with you. That's called do it. Stage 3. Let's have the 3 stages again. Number 1, leak it. Number 2, deny it. Number 3, do it. That's how they do it all around the world. It is called redundant. Who has heard of the word pain? There is some pain to be endured. That's what they tell us. But the guys that tell us that never seem to endure any pain themselves. They also use the phrase light at the end of the tunnel. Vote for us and we see light at the end of the tunnel. Let me say tonight, the only light at the end of the tunnel is the coming of Jesus Christ. Now here are some of the areas that have been pauperised. I'll go through them now. Sugar and steel. Just call out yes or no. Yes, sugar in Queensland, steel in New South Wales and around the country here. Next one, transport operators have been wrecked by putting a whole lot of taxes, road taxes on them, so they can hardly afford to run their trucks any longer. Farming has been decimated. They've driven the farmers off the land. I saw a guy on television in your country one night standing at the gate with his wife and children, and the police were there with their car, and they said, if you cross that cattle stop, we will arrest you. But he said, I own the farm, it's been in the family for years, and the policeman said, you cross that cattle stop, boy, and you're in my police car. So the guy said, here I go. He walked across the cattle stop. Next minute he's in the police car, and they took him away. Now in America, they bring in the sheriff, they bring in helicopters, they're doing the same thing there, and they remove the farmers. In fact, I believe there was one farmer going off the land every 10 seconds in the state at one point. Every 10 seconds. They were taking farmers off so quickly in one particular state. They're cutting back on the food supplies and removing farmers. And the sheriff comes in, they bring in trucks, they take away the tractors, the plows, and all the equipment and all the animals by truck. And the man never goes back on his property again. This is happening all around the world today. Don't be surprised. This is part of the plan. Education is being destroyed. No more allowed to whack the children on the bottom. But it's still legal to belt them over the head with a baton when they get older. That's interesting, isn't it? You can't whack their bottoms, which are perfectly made for it. And what are the children doing as a result? They are burning down the schools. And if you check in my country and your country pretty well every day in the paper, there goes another school, because the children are angry because they're not being disciplined. Children love being disciplined. When a child goes like this, he throws a wobbly, you know. No! What he's saying is, belt me, belt me. Here's another one. Fishing. Are they wrecking your fishing? All around the coast of our country, New Zealand, it is illegal for a commercial fisherman to catch a fish and then eat it at sea. He's got to bring it into the shore, declare it, and then take it out to sea and eat it afterwards. That's the law in our country. You may laugh, but I tell you what, that's happening around your country too. Up in Queensland and various parts around the coast of this country, they've brought an ITQ. Individual transferable quotas. Now many of the people who buy these quotas do not want to fish, they're not fishermen, so what do? They sell them to overseas, and according to the newspaper in New Zealand the other day, it said very soon in our country, the people in our country will sell their quotas to the biggest buyer, probably Japan, and Japan will own all the fisheries around the coast of our country because they've got more money to buy the individual transferable quotas. That's what's happening. It's very bizarre, but it is a world government plan so that nobody feels nationalistic any longer. You lose your feeling of being an Aussie. You become a citizen of the world. You are a member of a global village, they say. That's what they said in the days of the Tower of Babel. I like Margaret Thatcher. She made a comment on this. Margaret Thatcher said at least when they built the Tower of Babel, they all started speaking the same language. That's a good wise statement. Did you know also that they're fiddling with the seeds? They brought in a bill called Plant Breeders' Rights. Plant Breeders' Rights. PBR it's called, or PVR, Plant Variety Rights. Which means that the plant breeders now have the ability and the law on their side to turn the seeds into hybrids. They emasculate the seeds and take out the reproductive organs from the seeds, make hybrids out of them, put a patent on it so that you can no longer give your seeds to your next door neighbour. You must sell them, but you must pay on the patent as well. Verse 29, and God said, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. Now what the wicked men are doing today is they're taking the reproductive organs out and leaving that sterile. So you only get one good season's growth out of the seeds. And to any of you who want to collect seeds, I suggest you get them as soon as you can. It's a good idea to have seeds that will reproduce themselves. You can still get them in this country. There's one group in Tasmania called Phoenix Seeds, Smithton, Tasmania. Phoenix Seeds, Smithton, Tasmania, who still have non-hybrid seeds. You see, this is a clever move, friends. This will bring the hippies out of the bush. Do you hear me? This will bring them out of the bush. Because they can only grow their seeds once, then they've got to come out and get some new seeds. I was up in Brisbane one time. The Australian Agricultural Board was having a public meeting about plant breeders' rights. And I sat in the audience away out there somewhere, and this man stood up on behalf of the Australian Agricultural Board. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring about through plant breeders' rights bigger cabbages, bigger cauliflowers, bigger tomatoes." And in the middle of his talk, I stood up and I shouted, "Excuse me." And everybody turned round to see who this rude man was. And I said, "Are you saying this is a good bill, are you?" He said, "Oh, yes, sir. I said before, bigger tomatoes, bigger cauliflowers, bigger cabbages." I said, "I'll tell you what you're going to do. You're going to bring about world famine, because if you look on my chart up here, you'll see the Antichrist figure who is coming, comes on 4 horses. I look up here, please, see that little dot on the chart? He comes on a white horse. The Antichrist world leader will bring peace to the earth. He gets on a red horse. There is the Russian invasion of Israel. Don't you think communism is dead? Communism is not dead. I've got a friend who was up there the other day preaching. He was interrogated for 4.5 hours by the KGB. Some people think communism's dead just because the newspaper says it. You go up there and ask the Russians. Communism is still alive and well, and they're still going to invade the land of Israel. But it must happen after the peace treaty, make no mistake about that. Then the Antichrist gets on the black horse. You'll read all this in Revelation 6. He's got scales in his hand and he weighs out the food and charges exorbitant prices. And this is where the food thing comes in. I was talking at this plant breeders' rights meeting, you see. And then the last horse, the rider's name is Death. He kills those that don't receive the silicon chip in the right hand or forehead for buying and selling, as is spoken of in Revelation chapter 13. We are living in the last days, you see. And so in this plant breeders' meeting, this man said, "We're going to have bigger cabbages, bigger cauliflowers." I said, "Excuse me." I said, "If you go to New Zealand, you cannot buy a natural seed now. You're going to destroy the seeds of the world by fiddling with a natural resource that God made." He said, "Nonsense." I said, "What do you mean nonsense?" He said, "You're talking nonsense." I said, "Oh, is that right?" I said, "Do you live in New Zealand, do you?" He said, "No, I live here." Well, I said, "I happen to live in New Zealand, and until you live there, listen to me." That's the way to talk to those guys. Cheeky fellow trying to tell me. It's a devilish bill, I tell you, fiddling with the seeds. You watch, you'll see all this in the newspaper. Once you've heard it once, you'll say, "My word, he was right. He's right. He's right. It's all here." What else are they fiddling with? They're fiddling with the health system. They've mucked up all our hospitals. They've wrecked all the nursing. They've made it almost impossible for you to go and get health care now. You can't afford it. What's going on here? It's a world government plan. Now let me tell you the latest plan. In New Zealand, I just heard before I left, all doctors by July the 1st have to register with the local health board. This is by July the 1st. Every doctor has to register. Now let me try and get this right. He has to buy a computer which fits in with the government computer so they can suck information out of it. Every person in New Zealand by 1994 is have to going to register with one doctor in particular. They will give you a medical number that will carry you through, and if you don't get that number, you will pay full rates at all times. If the doctor refuses to sign up with a medical board in his locality, he is not allowed to get the rebate for his customers. Therefore, nobody will go to his clinic. All this is tying up the medical side so that the government has access to everybody's medical records. Post offices, have they wrecked yours yet? They shut down 300 post offices overnight in New Zealand, turned them into shops. No use trying to keep your post offices when they shut them down. It's called centralisation. I got a telephone call from Canada. A man rang me up. "Barry Smith," I said, "Yes." Said, "I came to your meeting in Kelowna, Canada. I heard what you said." He said, "Our post offices are just shutting down now." I said, "Quite right. It's all over the world. It's a global plan, but it starts in New Zealand and Australia. We are the world's first." Phone booths. Have they changed all your phone booths? What colour did they used to be? Red. I like the red ones best. Who likes the red ones? At least you could find them. These days in New Zealand, all ours are green. They merge in with the scenery. Yours are yellow, is that right? Not easy to find them these days. Do you remember the days when you used to put in a coin and you could speak as long as you liked for 20 cents, whatever? These days, what have you got to do? You've got to put in a phone card, you see. So you slip your card in and it goes, you watch it and it ticks down. What used to cost you 20 cents could cost you $5. And then it goes zzz. Then you put another one in, and away you go again. It could cost $20 to speak on a phone that used to cost you 20 cents. Now, the next thing they want to do to you is this. They haven't finished yet. They want to go on beyond that, and they want to move now into electricity cards. And I said this in a meeting. We were up in Scotland last year, and I said, very soon, this is in Perth, Scotland, and Glasgow, and they said, too late, we've got them. There it is, there's the Scottish power card. You put your card in before you use your electricity. I got back to New Zealand. We were speaking at Peter Morrow's church the other day in Christchurch, and the people called out, too late, we've got it in New Zealand already. Power card, there it is there. You'll have power cards soon. You put into your box there, and then you pay for your power, and then you use the power afterward. What's going on? This is to destroy everybody's lifestyle as they knew it, to make people confused, and finally they will say, give us a new world government and we will put everything to rest and you can rest again. And that's what they're doing. Did you know also that they are making us pay tax on everything? In New Zealand, if you gather moss for your garden, you have to pay tax on the moss that you gather now. If you pick up an empty abalone shell off the beach in New Zealand now, you have to declare it and pay tax on it. If you save money for your grandchild, you have to get a tax number for your grandchild now, because they want to make sure they know exactly who's got what and what's got who. There it is. So I suggest the day is coming, we'll have to do our saving in the old-fashioned way. It is called CIS, cash in sock. We are now reading the Word of God, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. All over Australia there are people who are dying now. I'll tell you something else they're shutting down. Timber mills. Have you all heard about the timber? All over the world the greenies are moving in and they're shutting down the timber business. You go to Washington State, thousands of timber workers are out of work because the greenies won't let them chop down the trees any longer because of a bird called the spotted owl. And on the main highway in Washington State there is a sign put up there by a disgruntled logger. This is what the sign says: I love the spotted owl, in brackets, fried. Did you know in New Zealand and Australia, and I see also in other countries now, they're selling the timber overseas? And local timber mills are closing down all over the country. Just the other day before we left New Zealand, we live in the Rye Valley in the South Island, our timber mill shut down. Do you know why? Because the timber mills were paying $100 a tonne for timber, and now the Japanese have come in and they've offered $200 a tonne, and so the men who grow the trees are now selling their timber overseas at $200 rather than get paid $100 by the local people. This is happening in your country, and it will be very difficult to build in timber soon because they're selling the timber overseas to overseas people. And if you want to get the timber, you'll have to buy it back from overseas again. It'll go for a trip overseas and then you buy it back again. That's what we're up to at the moment. We're now reading in the book of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 6. Read with me, please. And now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. King James readers. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. What is happening in the world today is a mystery. Unless you come to a meeting like this, you would never understand that it is a formulated plan. It is not by accident. Now what did we do in our country? We got rid of the Labor government. We thought they'd made a mistake. So out with them. We bring the national government in, and we find that they do exactly what the Labor government did. Of course they do, because they are bound to conditionalities policies. You people over here, you had an election the other day. Mr. Houston was going to give you GST. We stayed up late at night and watched it because we're 2 hours ahead of you see. So when they were putting it on your television, we had to wait up very late to see what's going on. So we did. It was all broadcast over there. We saw what happened, and the people didn't want particularly Mr. Keating to stay in power in many cases, but it was the choice of either GST or the Labor government, as it was before. They said no to GST and apparently got Mr. Keating again. Now, nobody is satisfied around the country. They all want a group that will come in and change things, but they can't, because the policies are already signed and sealed. Our only hope is to get a good relationship with God and start to live on a different realm and a different plane, our spiritual plane, where we begin to enjoy life through the power of Jesus Christ. He is fully God. He is Jesus, the man that was created by God, and he is the Christ, the anointed one. Fully God, fully man, and the only one who can save us from our sins. That's his name, Lord Jesus Christ. And if you want to chase devils, use that name. That moves them along, I tell you. In our country, And in your country, we used to have things called government departments. Who remembers those happy days we had government departments? where everything used to run very slowly but very happily. There was no stress and there was no tension. Do you remember those days? Now, these government departments were a bit like that. They're a bit laid back. So we saw one day, we woke up and we saw a new word in the newspaper, and the word was corporatisation. And all the unlearned people said to those who were learned, what does that big word mean? And all the clever people said, oh, that word means that they're going to take the power out of the hands of the government and put it into corporations. And all the people in Australia said, and New Zealand, oh, good. Less government control must be good for us. We wake up a few mornings later, we see a new word comes out in the paper. The word is privatisation. And all the people who don't know what it means says to those that did, what does that mean? And all the clever people show their knowledge by saying it means this. It is taking the power further out of the hands of the government and putting it in private hands. And all the people in Australia and New Zealand said, oh, good. Then we go to bed and we get up again, having been in and out of bed a few times in the meantime. And we wake up and we see a new word in the paper, and the word is shares. We begin to smell a rat at that point, and we go, sniff, sniff. We write letters urgently to our government members. We say, we are very nervous. We say, you are issuing shares, and we are frightened overseas people will buy into our country. And your government member writes you back and says this, don't worry about a thing. Everything is under control. We are only issuing shares at 49% overseas. We will keep the major shareholding at 51%, and all the Aussies and New Zealanders said, oh, good. Remember, the key word is gradualism. We wake up a few mornings later, and what do we see? The shares have then gone up to 51% overseas, and at that point, overseas people come in and buy up all the stuff that my grandfather and your grandfather paid for in the government department. They lose everything. Lock, stock and barrel is sold overseas, and we never see it again, ever. It's gone for good. You say, is this happening all over the world? Yes. You go to the United States of America, listen to what they've sold over there. The Rockefeller Center has gone to the Japanese. Universal Studios has gone to the Japanese. Go to Pebble Beach, California, next to Monterey. They've sold up the golf course there to the Japanese. I was preaching down in Texas, and a man ran in off the street, and he said, guess what's gone now? I said, what? He said, 7-Eleven is now owned by the Japanese. And you'll find the Australians and the English and the New Zealanders and the Arabs are coming in all over the world, buying and buying and buying. Everybody's buying into everybody's country, so everybody loses their assets, and once you lose your assets, you've lost your nationality ultimately, because there's nothing to hold you together. In came Bill Clinton, and some of you say, is Bill Clinton a world government man? Answer, yes, he is. He has also been trained up in world government principles, for he was a Rhodes Scholar, very like Bob Hawke, your ex-Prime Minister. Anybody who is a Rhodes Scholar is trained in international thinking, in globalism, and Bill Clinton has been trained along that line. Secondly, Bill Clinton has been attending the Bilderbergers meeting, which are the world government people who meet in Europe regularly, and he was a participant in the latest round of the Bilderbergers talks. And also, number three, he has been studying the works of a man called Carroll Quigley, a professor. This man, Carroll Quigley, wrote a book called Tragedy and Hope, and he himself was involved in the one world government system. And Bill Clinton, when he made his inaugural speech, used esoteric language. This is what he said. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man what we can do for you. Now, what does that mean? You take a Bible verse, you say enough of it to make God come into the picture, then you change the end bit, and anybody into witchcraft, Satanism or the occult understands that Bill Clinton is involved in this system. What the verse really says is this, say it with me, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man the things that God has prepared for them that love him. And so Bill Clinton has revealed himself as being a one-world government man, and he will go along with the plan to introduce this thing, get rid of the sovereignty of the United States of America, so that America can be included in the New World Order. Now, I'm going to stick my neck out tonight. I'll give you a prophecy. I'm going to speak ahead of time. If Bill Clinton stays in the job, it'll be well. If he doesn't, say something goes wrong and he displeases his masters, he will go, and in comes the next man whose name is Al Gore. Now, Al Gore is a new age man. He is very, very fond of environmentalism. He is a man who promotes the sort of almost the worship of Earth and Mother Gaia. And therefore, you can expect to see this man being very, very powerfully used in the days ahead. Bill Clinton or Al Gore, whoever stays in power as the president, will have to do the following. Listen, they will have to cancel or suspend the Constitution of the United States of America, because you cannot possibly include America in the New World Order as long as they have a constitution like that that separates them from the rest of the world. Now, some of you may know that there was a man called Oliver North. Who has heard of Oliver North? Oliver North was questioned during the Senate hearings, and this is what they said to him. I have a copy of the video at home, and they said, Colonel North, were you at any time involved in a plan to suspend the Constitution of the United States of America? He was just about to answer, and the man in charge of the committee, his name was Inouye, I think his name, from Hawaii, the senator from Hawaii, said, we will not answer that question, Senator. And the senator who asked the question came from Texas. He said, we will deal with this question quietly later on, for this is a matter of national security. Oliver North was not allowed to answer the question, was he involved in a plan to suspend the Constitution of the United States? So anybody here tonight who has links with the United States of America, you're going to be shocked very soon to see the Constitution suspended and the whole thing changed around to make way for the United States of America to link up with the New World Order. Now, many of you would not know, but George Bush was a member of a highly secret group called the Order, which comes out of Yale University, called the Skull and Bones. A man called Anthony Sutton wrote a book or two on the subject. One of his books is called The Order by Anthony Sutton, and there you will see the Skull and Bones, or 322, and they follow the policies of German philosophy because it is a German secret society. Now, anybody who's into German politics or German history will know that they follow the philosophies of two great men, and I refer to Kant and Hegel. And Hegel is the one we're speaking about now, because this is the one the Order follows. Remember, the ex-president of the United States belonged to an alien society called the Skull and Bones, went on to join a group called the Order, and they follow the philosophies of a German philosopher called Hegel. It is called the Hegelian dialectic. Let me read to you, I'll put it on the board for you so you can see it, from this man Anthony Sutton's book, The Meaning of the Hegelian Dialectic. He says, in history, you must always have two forces working against each other. You have one which is called thesis, and the other one antithesis, or antithesis, you see. So what they do is this: they follow this thought. All historical events emerge from a conflict between opposing forces, says Hegel. Now, what does that mean? You could not introduce the New World Order without a battle. They needed to have a conflict. So where did they set up the conflict? Answer, in the Middle East. Who was the man they used? A man called Saddam Hussein. And if you read my book P.S., which is coming out tomorrow night, you will read in there how that the Russians sent a man down called General Makashov to speak to Saddam Hussein before he invaded Kuwait. And he said to him, you move into Kuwait, nothing will go wrong, all will be well, don't worry about a thing. At the same time, the Americans sent in a woman called April Glaspie. And we were in the States at the time. The Congress interviewed this woman, and they said to her, what advice did you give to Saddam Hussein? And she said, I told him, Arab problem, Arab solution. Now, what does that mean? It means that your problem, you settle it your way, America probably will not be involved in this thing. That's what he thought. And so poor old Saddam Hussein, not understanding what's going on, moves into Kuwait. He is immediately attacked by the international forces of the world for the first time in history. Exactly as Hegel says, there can be no change in history without a conflict, and Saddam Hussein was the catalyst that set off the New World Order. And therefore you understand that's why they didn't kill Saddam Hussein. Why didn't they get rid of him? They brushed away the cobwebs, but they left the spider. And so the answer is this: they may have to use him again, because that man is a useful tool in the hands of the New World Order people. Now you say, can you prove what you're saying tonight? Answer, yes. Who's heard of a man called Robert Maxwell? He's the man who fell off his yacht. Do you remember that? Robert Maxwell. Who's heard of a man called, who was the ex-prime minister of this country that drowned or went missing at sea? What's his name? Harold Holt. I met a man in Queensland one day and he told me, he said, have you heard this? He said, I've just heard the other day that the same frogman that murdered Harold Holt is the same frogman that got Robert Maxwell. I said, really? I said, where did you hear that? He said, I was talking to Elvis Presley in the supermarket this morning. I am now going to put on a cutting from one of Robert Maxwell's newspapers. The name of the paper is The European, and here it is. It's called Old New World Order, The European, on the 14th to the 16th of June 1991. This newspaper is saying what I have been saying for years, and at last it is out in public. I will read it to you. Yale's founding slogan is Novus Ordo Seclorum, which means New World Order. The president is known to be a keen Yalie, full of school spirit, and endures a good deal of teasing about his membership of the Skull and Bones. There it is. It's in the newspaper at last. One day, shortly, you will wake up and cash will be cancelled, and it will say, everybody go to your bank and pick up your plastic card. At that stage, many people will jump into the Georges River because they cannot stand the thought of living without cash. Here's the bad news. That was good news in comparison with what you're going to hear now. Any money you have saved up at this point will not be credited to your new account. They will start again as they did in Germany in 1948. The people there were using a form of currency called the Reichmark, the Hitler currency, but as they studied the economy in Bonn, they said that a cancellation of the old system would be the best approach to starting all over again. There was no warning to the populace in Germany 1948. The newspaper had it in headlines there, Reichmark cancelled. And all these dear people had a lot of money, many of them had a lot of money, they lost it overnight, and everybody went to the bank the next morning and were given 40 Deutschmarks to start again with. Now, if you were a poor man, you were delighted. You were now the owner of 40 Deutschmarks. If you were a rich man who had lost 1,000,000 marks or whatever, you then bought a pistol with your 40 Deutschmarks for blowing your brains out. Because if you don't know Jesus Christ, all you've got left is suicide. Now, some of you in this meeting tonight have considered from time to time committing suicide. I have a little word for you. I would suggest you never do it. Because if you think you have problems now, you don't even know what the other problem is like on the other side. It is called in English, out of the frying pan into the fire, literally. So do not ever commit suicide. Go to the person who has his name on my chart over there. His name is Jesus. For without Jesus Christ, you have no hope. Someone says, can I beat the system any other way? No. There is only one other way I can think of, and I've been going for over 30 years. Buy yourself a rocket and fly off the earth. However, your next problem is, where do you land your rocket? In Germany, they cancelled the cash, and you'll find that people who have been dealing on a cash basis, you will suddenly be given a plastic card. People will line up for their cards.
Trees make a world of difference between sand